Welcome to the Kitchen Table Finance Podcast, where we make retirement planning easy and enjoyable. Discover practical advice to create a retirement strategy that fits your lifestyle and budget.
Hey Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nick. How are you?
Good. Back for another podcast episode.
Here we go.
Today's
I'm trying to match your enthusiasm.
we are reviewing the headlines. What's going on in retirement planning news? What's the latest? What are the studies? What are the nonsense?
Yeah,
What to look out for? All the fun stuff, right?
all the fun stuff. Yeah. So it's been beginning of the year. There's always lots of like self-help, how to fix your life kind of articles out there. So,
Oh yeah.
it's good to
Health
take a
and
look at those.
finances. What if
Yeah.
January isn't about health and finances, I don't know what is, right?
Well, right. And that's a perfect segue because our first one that we grabbed here is an article from the New York Times with the keys to longevity, which, right? I
Aha.
mean, that's financial planning, right? We're always trying to
Yeah.
figure out like how long people are going to live and how to best live their life during retirement, right?
Yep. Although I will say it's easier to plan for people if they know, when they're going to die and they don't live very long. The planning
Right.
on
We're
that
not
is
supposed
easier. It's not better, but
to.
it's
Right.
easier.
Right. Oh, we are cruising this morning. So, yeah, this little New York Times article, I thought this was pretty good. You know, nothing earth shattering, but good stuff to consider. Basically, comes down to move more, eat well, don't s- don't smoke, drink in moderation if you drink at all, get enough sleep, take care of your chronic conditions. But then we get down to prioritize relationships. I thought that was good. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't hear that one come up in an article on living long, but they've got studies that show, people that prioritize their relationships live a little longer and live happier.
I'm glad
And
this is in there because I think this is one
yeah,
of those that in retirement, especially, what
hmm
people fail to realize as a part of their retirement plan is the majority of Americans' connectivity, their relationships are born out of work because
hmm
that's where they spend the majority of their waking hours, right? And
right,
sometimes we fail to plan for okay.
yeah,
I go into the office. I've got 40 plus hours a week. I've got coworkers that I
yeah.
interact with, and if I stop doing that, how do I replace that?
Right. I read a similar piece sometime last year where they talked about how during your working years you have two automatic communities, right? If you've got kids, you've got a community right there where you're working with other parents and
Yeah.
going to sporting events and that sort of thing, and then your work family,
Right.
and in retirement it takes a little effort. You've got to recreate
Yeah.
that yourself.
Right.
I thought that was a great point. And this last one too, cultivate a positive mindset. If all you're
Mm,
doing in retirement is sitting and watching, um, pick your, sport, or your not sports, pick your news channel, depending on
right.
your proclivities, and that's all you're doing is watching the doom scroll of headlines. You're actually probably affecting your health and longevity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, good stuff.
Yeah, so we kind of joke about that one, but also, following these things, doing these things in retirement is going to probably end up saving you money. Being healthier is always
Well,
a better option in retirement.
right. Yeah, it all has a financial component to it. Yeah, yeah.
Good stuff. Tell us a little bit about this next one, Dave. Why should we stop? Should we
So
our morning coffee at Starbucks or not? What say
I
you?
I liked this one because John Reckenthaler in Morningstar, in this "Skipping Your Coffee Won't Make You a Millionaire" article, is basically taking good old Susie Orman to task.
Uh-huh.
Um, and there's different variations on this. She's the one that promoted the coffee one. But hey, if you just took the coffee money that you spend every day and put it in an investment account instead, you'd be a millionaire, by the
Right.
end of your life. And so John, being a little more analytical maybe than Ms. Orman, actually did the math. And what he found, I mean, and it's a little tongue in cheek. I think his points are well made. If you picked the most expensive coffee in Manhattan and you didn't substitute, like you didn't say, well, I'll make coffee at home
Right.
instead, you didn't. I mean, he got pretty granular with this, and you invested right. And this is the kicker: if you don't account for inflation,
Ah,
you would likely, if all those things played out and the market did what it should do, you'd likely have $1 million investment account at the end of your life. But that would be $1 million in today's dollars, not $1 million in
yeah,
future used dollars. So it's a little misleading to say that. But he's the first to tell you, the subheadline is, as fables go, this one is relatively useful. And so, the point is well made. Ms. Orman's idea of taking something that maybe you're spending a little extra money on that you don't need to, and investing it, will definitely improve your life down the road financially.
sure.
I mean, we can talk about the social network you get from having your cup of coffee in
Yeah,
the morning with your friends,
right.
but and I'm not giving up my coffee. I don't care. But you know, um,
Well, a couple thoughts on this is yes, and pure terms, headline grabbing terms, math or not, right? Like if you spend less money and you invest more money, you will end up with more money, right?
right,
Like we can all
right,
agree on that.
right.
However, and I'm not sure what she has against coffee, but
It's
and I
expensive.
tell people this all the time. If we want a financial plan based on the math, that's great. Go live in a cardboard box and save and invest everything, because the
Right,
math works out
right,
much better that way, right?
right,
Don't
right.
ever retire, keep saving, keep investing. But, and then, the flip side of that is, and we've, gone over some of these studies and some of the books of, when you're laying on your deathbed, my guess is you're not going to say, man, I'm glad I skipped all those coffees and
Right,
now I have an extra $1 million, right?
right,
So
right,
find your balance. Yes, you should be saving and investing, but also you should be living your life and enjoying it, because what's the point of saving and investing if you can't utilize those resources for more enjoyment, right? All
right. And I
right,
I
I'll
will
stop lecturing now.
I'll have a sip of coffee as we ponder that. Um, yeah, good stuff.
Oh.
Good stuff. And now for something completely different.
Yeah.
Um, CNBC had a piece on how to protect yourself from tax identity theft this season.
Yeah, this is one that is coming up more and more. I don't know about you, Dave. I have a couple clients that have been trapped in this with state tax returns. And once it happens to you, I can guarantee this: it is a pain beyond pain, and it will
Yeah,
last for years.
yeah.
But kind of the idea behind it is criminals are using your personal information to file a
Hmm.
tax return for you
Hmm.
and basically get a refund under your social security number
Right,
and taking that refund and doing with it what criminals do, right?
right, right. And then you go to file, and the IRS is like, "Oh, wait a minute, you already filed."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and
So there was
makes it a little difficult.
something like, let's see, the stats on this: 294,000 individual cases in 2023, which was
Wow,
up from 92,000 in 2019.
wow.
And it takes an average of 19 months to process returns once this happens to you. That's just in the year it happens, let
Right.
alone there's, your returns get flagged from here on out, and it's kind of more of a longer process. So,
Yeah.
couple of practical ways to kind of protect yourself. And, this may or may not be practical depending on your situation, but if you file your tax return early, um, you know, there's less chance that you have a criminal that can file it before,
Right.
right? Because the
Yeah.
first one wins in
Yeah.
terms of who gets to deal with the nonsense. So if you've already filed, they can't go in and file because it's going to flag. So filing your tax return early, if you can, if you have an easy return, that's getting harder and harder to do these days. But it is one way to protect yourself. And then another way is if you're worried about it, if you know your information is out there, you can get an identity protection pin from the IRS, which
Hmm.
basically means that they won't accept any returns unless you're using this six-digit number. You get a new one every year that they send you. It's open to everyone now, so you don't have to. It previously was if you had fraud issues, but now everyone can get one. So it might be too late. It more than likely is too late for this year, but something you could consider for next year is getting that pin to kind of protect yourself if you think that's something that everybody's information is out there. I hate to say it. Um,
Hmm.
don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
steps
Yeah.
like this, if you're worried about it, just go a long way to helping make sure that you don't have to deal with the
Yeah.
ramifications or
Yeah.
fallout of that.
It is a pain. It is a pain. All right.
Indeed. Let's flip to something more
Yeah,
exciting,
something a little
right?
more
Well,
fun.
nothing worse than taxes and fraud all wrapped up in one
Right. Let's
article.
just let's just move on, right? Yeah. So this next one from Think Advisor, more than half of Americans want to retire gradually, according to a survey. And I like this, and we've talked about this idea off and on for years here. But the idea that retirement doesn't have to be a hard stop, and for a lot of people, it's healthier to decrease your hours along the way instead of just be done.
Yeah, it's one of those things that for a long time, I feel like a lot of people felt like it was just kind of a pipe dream.
Right.
But, considering where we're at today, we have a very strong labor market and we are in a situation where intellectual jobs and
Mm-hmm.
experience matter, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to replace someone who's been doing a job. And I just think of I was meeting with a tax prepare this morning. So, you're not going to replace a 30-year vet of doing tax returns with someone fresh out of college, right? Like that
Exactly.
knowledge, that's a significant knowledge gap.
Right.
So
Yeah.
now, we're seeing more companies, we're seeing more people say, hey, I don't want to keep working 40 to 50 hours a week, but I'd like to come in the office a couple days a week and maybe do 25 or 30 and start there and slowly kind of ease my way out and maybe train the next person that's going to take over and give some of my knowledge to the next generation, but also not have as much stress and strain as I do under, working full time. So
Yeah.
according to this survey, 52% of Americans reported that gradually decreasing their hours is their preferred way. And that includes 67% of Gen X and 56% of millennials, which I'm kind of somewhat surprised that 56% of millennials even think about retirement at this point. So, but I guess that's a different article for a different
Well,
day.
yeah. Yeah. We beat up on them in our last podcast, so let's
Yeah,
not overdo
exactly.
it, right?
Yep. And then, I think Gen X is kind of in that category where the gradual makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's 46% of baby
Oh,
boomers
well, as a Gen
would move
Xer,
immediately
we'll
from
just,
working to full
you
time
know,
retirement.
we're just going to keep our heads down and support our parents and support our siblings and, do what we have to do on our own because that's what we've always done. So,
Yeah. So
anyway,
interestingly enough, this is the preferences that of people that of how they want to do it. But current
yeah.
retirees actually transitioning out of the workforce, 72% stopped working immediately, 18%
Yeah.
gradual phase down. So there is some disconnect going on between
Well,
like, hey, we want
it,
to do this, and B, it didn't really ever happen the way we thought we wanted it to,
the,
right?
and this is just anecdotal though too. I've talked to a few people these last few months that seemed reluctant to even bring that topic up with their employer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's I think there's a little bit of a cultural shift that has to go on there where it's like that your employer, like as you pointed out, maybe more open to that than you might realize because it's
For
in their
sure.
best interest not to have you just, hey, I'm
Right.
done in 2 weeks. It gives them a transition time, but I think we're not used to thinking that way.
Yeah.
And you know what what do you really have to lose with talking to your employer about that, because they're gonna assume you're gonna retire anyway. It's not like you're
Right.
surprising them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you talk to them a little bit ahead of time about those kind of transitions, or look for something completely different on the other side too. There's lots of different ways to think about
Yeah,
that.
according to this, 10% transition careers and
Yeah.
as kind of their phase out. So it's interesting. I'd like to see, in a couple of years if these numbers change and how they change. But I think you're right, Dave. I think, as more and more people get to that age ready to retire, I think and obviously people want it and employers
Hmm.
want it. So, eventually, hopefully we'll break through that disconnect and make it more plausible. But interesting study nonetheless. So,
Yeah. So
I
what are the
hope
kids
you
doing these
are gonna
days?
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hope you like this next one because I absolutely love it. There is a TikTok trend now called loud budgeting,
Yeah.
which is apparently the opposite of quiet luxury, which I'm not entirely sure what quiet luxury is. But loud budgeting, I feel like, is really cool because there is this stigma behind, being stingy or not spending money, and there's always been a friction around talking about money. But
Right.
loud budgeting is kind of the exact opposite of that, and it's trending on TikTok. So I think maybe what this means, Dave, is you and I are cool again.
Yeah, right. We've come back around. It happens. It happens. But like wide ties and bell-bottom jeans. Um, but what's interesting here, there's always been this cultural thing about talking about money, right? You don't
Yeah.
do it. And I think that's what
Hmm.
like quiet luxury is. When I read that, I was thinking, okay, that's kind of the status quo. Like we just go spend on these nice things and everybody sees them. We don't necessarily talk about them, but I'm wearing the nice watch and the right shoes, and and that's part of what social media gets beaten up for, right?
Oh,
That
absolutely.
these influencers are generally causing people to spend more money on things they don't really need just to match the trends, you
Hmm.
know um
And oh,
and,
by the way,
and
that's how they're getting paid, is to
right,
pitch
yeah,
these
yeah,
things,
well,
right?
yeah, that's a whole, yeah, I could go on for a couple hours about how I feel about social media, but this is kind of the like an anecdote to that in a couple ways, and it's removing, in a way, it's like saying, no, it doesn't matter if I can afford it or not, it would be irresponsible of me.
Yeah.
It's
And
kind of
being loud and
reframing that.
vocal about that,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
Whereas before it'd be like, oh, like if you didn't participate in a trend or you didn't do something, people would be like, oh, she must not be able to afford that,
Right.
And instead you're saying, oh, that's not the point. Whether you can or can't isn't really the point. It's that it would be irresponsible of you to do it. You should
Yeah.
pay
And
down your
you're
student loan instead of going to Cabo. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Absolutely. And you're taking control of that and taking control of
right,
that narrative and saying,
right.
I'm not going to do that because I need to do this. And that's more important to me,
Yeah,
which I think is really huge. And,
yeah,
hopefully something that we continue to see. I love the
yeah,
trend. I hope
yeah.
more people
So
loud budget.
so maybe there's some hope for the ticks and the talks and the
Well, and honestly, I think it's not just for the kids too, right? Like
flip.
there's
Yeah.
some people who, are our age who should probably be doing more loud budgeting and not just going along with, going out to an expensive dinner
Right.
with friends just because they want to go. And so you feel bad for telling them no, right? I
Right.
think we can
Right.
all learn to loud budget a little bit more and be a little bit more upfront about our priorities and spending goals and
As long
habits.
as I don't have to do it on Twitter and I'm not dancing on TikTok.
Oh, I think we're getting you a TikTok, Dave. I think that's the
All right.
now that you're cool on TikTok and you can loud budget, I think we need to get you a TikTok.
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. All right. Moving along. What's next?
So this last one is a blog piece from our friend. I call him friends. We've never met, but Mr. Morgan Housel put out a piece titled "Frugal versus Independent." And
Yes.
as always, there is a bunch of nuggets in here that I love. But the first one being just kind of talking about how doing well with money isn't necessarily how smart you are or where you went to school, right? Like there's no studies that say people that do well with money all went to Harvard or Ivy League schools, right? It's
Hmm.
just about having the right behavior, right? Patience, control over greed and fear, long term thinking. Those are things that everybody in habits that everybody can get into. And so, it's just one of those things where money isn't necessarily about education. It's more about building the right habits.
Yeah, building the right habits, taking your time, regulating your spending needs.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I think my favorite part of this article is he went on to talk a little bit about Chuck Feeney,
Hmm.
who founded the duty free stores. And Chuck died last month. The well known part of his story is that he gave away 99.99% of his $8 billion fortune years
Yes.
before he died. So he and his wife kept about 2 million, lived in a small apartment, flew coach, and gave the rest to charity. And the interesting part about that is he actually did, have the high life, right? He had the house in
Hmm.
Aspen and the private jets. And what he found out is he just didn't like it very much, right? Like it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
him. It wasn't
Yeah.
who he wanted to be. And what he figured out is that what he did like and what he did enjoy was giving the money away. That brought
Right.
him more happiness, which I think is phenomenal. And it's just one of those, it's just another great story about how you really need to find out what is going to give you happiness. And I can almost guarantee it's not going to be more money. All right. And so
Yeah.
once you figure
Yeah.
out what that thing is, then create your financial plan around it, right? Like if you have more than money than you need and giving it away gives you more
Yeah.
happiness, then by all means, like find a way to do that. Find
Yep.
a way to bring yourself more happiness because getting more money isn't going to do it for most people. And so I think that's just kind of a great example from Mr. Morgan Housel and the Chuck Feeney. So
Yes.
thought it was very
I,
cool. Very,
yeah.
very Morgan Housel to kind of bring us back
I,
to,
I, when I read Mr. Housel, I picture him sitting on a mountaintop somewhere, cross-legged in the lotus position, just dispensing wisdom for me. It's
yeah,
always good stuff. It's always good stuff. So,
yeah. Just another great reminder of, the world's a lot simpler than we make it sometimes.
right, right, right.
So
Good.
that is what we have for January and February headlines,
Yeah,
Dave.
good month for good stuff, and we'll have links to all of these in the notes that go with the
Yeah.
podcast.
And if our listeners stumble across something here in the month of March, send it to us. We'll review it, and maybe it'll show up on our next
Yeah,
headline review. You can
I love
send
it.
those to us at info@srbadvisors.com.
The interactive portion of our show.
It's been a pleasure as always,
It's been
Dave.
great, Nick. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
This is a Zedia Media production.